Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the RotoWire #After Dark Champions League show. My name is Jack Burkart. You can find me on Twitter at Jack Burkart. And that's right, you do not see Ryan Belangi. I kicked Ryan off the show. If you listened on Friday, he bullied me ruthlessly off of Morgan Gibbs White, who absolutely nuked the Premier League slate. I'm just joking. Ryan's a great guy, always very helpful. You can't get everything right. And he's on vacation right now. So we were hunting for some guests. I DM'd our friend Basil Nabi. Basil has won 13 King of the Pitch tickets in the last 12 months. I checked Twitter. The first one, Basil, believe it or not, was December 1st. So almost a year now. So how are you feeling about this upcoming Tuesday Champions League slate? Do you think you can make it 14 in 12 months?
Well, I saw they just put up the contest a little bit later than I was expecting, so I did a little bit of prep. Yeah, feeling pretty good.
That's awesome to hear. So, Basil, I wanted to introduce you because you kind of came out of nowhere. You posted a couple wins in the Discord starting World Cup, and we're like, oh, nice, a user won a ticket. And then at some point, you won like 3 in a month or something. And I was in the writers' room with Adam and Ryan. We're like, who is this guy? And then so like we did a little bit of stalking and that sort of thing. I saw you were a big Magic the Gathering player, and so I'm like, oh man, that's the sign of a sharp person. That's one thing I learned while getting my math PhD. So I don't know. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself? How'd you get into DFS? How long have you been playing DFS? Do you just focus on soccer? How'd you get into things?
Yeah, so I mean, you hit it right on the head there. I was playing Magic competitively since I was 16. I started playing when I was 9, so I have kind of the competitive gaming background, you could say. I used to travel for tournaments and go all over the world to play in high stakes tournaments. DFS, I've always been a sports fan, primarily basketball and soccer. So my first foray in was NBA DFS. I think probably in 2020, but very casual. Definitely was a losing player because I was kind of trying to sneak in low stakes games while I was at work. Because I'm on the West Coast, so you get a 4 p.m. start, and I needed to get some lineups in. So that was how I started. And then I discovered the King of the Pitch, and I started trying to learn how to win. And I found you guys and watched your videos, and I lost a lot at first, but it's evening out now.
I think you may owe us a little bit after how you've gone the last 12 months. Yeah, NBA DFS, that's pretty tough, especially if you're on the West Coast. And my understanding is you're basically you're married to your laptop when you're playing a sport with late swap like that. So welcome to the good side. Hope if only soccer had prize pools as big as basketball. But yeah, was it just kind of the King of the Pitch that attracted to you? So I know you're a big soccer fan. You're rocking the Celtic jersey. And I don't know what type of contest you played. I think initially you were just grinding these King of the Pitch contests, right? Was it just the siren song of 100K up top in soccer that was appealing to you? Or was there anything else about it that seemed really exciting?
It was simply 200 people for 100K. That was just, it seemed like if I can figure out how to win the qualifiers, in Magic, you have these Pro Tour qualifiers to get you to the high stakes event, which is small field. And it's kind of the same logic as like I would just play those. So same idea here. And then that got me into playing some of the other double ups or large GPPs, but those are definitely not my priority. And those I only play when I remember to join, or if I'm feeling really good about my lineups. It's like my priority is always the King of the Pitch.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I guess the small field stuff, if you're playing in the King of the Pitch, you might be able to enter, the scissor kick or the scorpion kick, whatever type of stuff they're running. But is there something just about like that winner take all that you think you have that extra edge with, or is it just that 200 people and that stupid 600K up top that we have to take down?
Well, I really like single entry. So anything single entry, I think I feel like I can gain an edge there. When you can enter a bunch of lineups, I don't like it as much. And given that the King of the Pitch is only 200 people, and the last year's was 8 entries, if you could win up to 8, and this year 10, I feel like I can gain an edge there. But these weekend GPPs where you can enter hundreds of lineups, I throw a few in there sometimes, but I really have no idea how to actually gain an edge there, and unless you enter way too many lineups.
Yeah, it's really tough to know. I've been taking shots at this stupid showdown of the week, and I don't know. Showdown's been particularly hard for me this season. Let's talk about talk about a format that's really tough to gain an edge. It's only like 6 lineup spots, and I feel like any reasonable lineup is getting duplicated a lot these days. So I definitely like these smaller contests as well. Unfortunately, those are a little too high dollar for me, but I saw that you even took down the $5, the 700 person field for the king of the pitch. So I guess we're increasing the field size, so that might not be good for the rest of us.
Yeah, I'll still play those. I was only going to enter one lineup because I was going to play the mega qualifier and just use whatever lineup I used there in the $5. But just because I thought 21 lineups is too many to enter within that 1 hour window for me to actually figure it out. But I had done some prep the night before and felt pretty good about where I was at. So I decided to enter the full amount. I mean, if you saw the lineup I played, it didn't look very great, but it had the 3 players you needed to win plus enough serviceable players from there. So
I love that lineup. I definitely took a look. When you get into the bigger fields, you get to be a little bit more giga-brained, like throw 5 Bournemouth players in the same lineup, ignore all the defenders, and just put up the whole stack. I mean, you look at the lineup, I thought it was spectacular. And then, of course, when you have the 3 guys who score 40 points, you have some wiggle room for error from that point on. What else was I going to ask you? I mean, you've been talking about kind of gaining an edge on the field. You like it's kind of the qualifiers. It's sort of similar to Magic the Gathering. So you definitely seem like an analytics guy to me, Basil. So I'm a mathematician, but I don't really have any like modeling abilities whatsoever. So I've unfortunately had to rely on just like my grit and some like conceptual directional understanding to approach DFS. I like to use some game theory to help my decisions if I think I have a good read on what the field does. That's very dangerous, of course, when you screw that up. So how do you approach DFS? Do you maybe take a conceptual, try to no ball type of approach, or do you try to grind the spreadsheets and try to outproject the field or find some edges in that sort of way?
Definitely a spreadsheet grinder. I'm no math expert, though. It's very elementary, but I will essentially look at odds, find the players I want on the favorites or the cheap players, and then put it all into a spreadsheet with some of the things that I think matter and kind of figure out the best value plays from there and the best combinations I can come up with. But I don't think I've ever entered a lineup without putting some stuff into a spreadsheet.
All right, nice. So it's not like you have this whole like massive player pool database spanning the last 10 years where like Pedro Porro's stats when he was a 16-year-old playing in high school, and that makes his crossing rate bump up just a little bit. So it's a little bit of a manual approach, I guess, is what you're saying.
Very much manual, and I try and only look at if it's earlier in the season, I may look at the season before, but teams change so much even over a summer that the previous data may not matter as much. So it's just more recent data, typically just the current season.
I feel like that's a huge edge, though, to have just some type of number to look at. Even when you look at it, right, you're sort of using your brain. You're picking out players who conceptually seem like very good players, and then you're putting in numbers to try to get some backing to who's actually better, right? And sometimes on the RotoWire show, like I'm talking to Ryan, and we're like, well, this guy might have like a little bit of a better floor, but this game environment. And so if you do have a good feel for what things matter, it almost gives you a bit more of a backbone to be like, okay, this is definitely a couple points better, or I like this range of outcomes a little bit better. I think it's an admirable approach in that way. Do you find that it helps clear ambiguities like that?
Definitely. I mean, I'm sure some predictive analytics expert could do it much better than I could, but ultimately this allows me to come to a decision that I'm comfortable with, both on logically in my head, I can prove it on a spreadsheet that this is how I came to that decision and I'm comfortable with those decisions. So,
yeah. I think that's awesome. And it's DFS, right? We only have to be better than the field. We don't have to be better than, like Bet365 or Pinnacle betting into like huge high liquidity markets. So I like that. That's kind of inspiring to hear, actually, which might be the wrong lesson that you want from talking to me. But maybe it's a good excuse to learn some Excel. But thanks for sharing a little bit about that, Basil. But, enough nerd talk. We have a question from Steve in the chat. We're wondering if Basil's able to put his United bias aside to lock in Haaland on all slates. So are you an Erling Haaland guy, or are you one of these hopeless faders like myself?
Oh, I was a pro Haaland in all lineups for a long time.
Just click the button and make it work in the rest.
Yep. And I am also a Man U fan. So yeah, good call there. Man U and Celtic are the 2 teams that I follow. So painful being a Man U fan right now, but I'm happy to play the City players when it makes sense.
Oh yeah, Adam was making fun of me in Discord. I made just a couple lineups for the stupid Tottenham showdown on Sunday, and he's like, "Oh, Tottenham fan Jack has Emmy." I'm like, "You're telling me I might be able to make $20? My Tottenham fandom is thrown out the
Exactly.
window." So smarter than all of us, just jamming in Holland. But Basil, let's just get in and actually talk some ball now that we're 10 minutes in. I think this is a really fun Champions League slate that we're looking at. Manchester City are again the biggest favorite, but they're at home to RB Leipzig, who, although they've struggled a little bit in Bundesliga, are a solid outfit. 72% chance to win with the implied win odds. And you're looking at like 2.25 implied goal total. So, highest win odds, highest goal total. That's nothing new from Manchester City slate. The question is who can keep up with them? And we have Barcelona, who are like curiously high odds, at least to me. From what I've seen from Barcelona, they haven't been impressive. But a home match to Porto rates as the second best matchup. PSG have a good matchup against Newcastle United, both teams suffering from a ton of injuries. And then we have AC Milan hosting Borussia Dortmund. That whole group with PSG, Newcastle, AC Milan, and Dortmund is totally up for grabs, which might create some exciting games, in my opinion. And then I think one of the most important matches of the slate, just based solely on price dynamics, is this Young Boys hosting Red Star Belgrade. DraftKings has been doing this weird thing with this price lately where it's really not sensitive to matchup. It's really stuck in historical pricing for some reason. And so a lot of players under 6K, a lot of players under 7K in that matchup who seem to have good ceilings. And both those teams are going to be fighting, maybe to put on a show on fighting for Europa League. So if that game goes off, you're going to need multiple pieces, at least in my opinion. So when you open up the slate and you were looking at the matchups, how were things looking to you? Did it seem like, it's going to be another Manchester City slate, or did you like these other spots when you were looking at it?
I actually am leaning more towards the other spots. I don't think Man City care and have much to play for. So, I mean, while there may be goals in that game, there may be a lot of rotation, but ultimately it really comes down to who actually gets the starts. If a lot of the players that don't regularly start are playing, then I'm more interested. But the players that regularly start, I'm less interested in. So those are not auto includes for me.
Yeah, if we're looking at the expected lineup, Adam kind of has some spicy takes in his projected 11. But, we have the sort of Christmas tree type formation. We have three center backs. And, there's some familiar names. We have Erling Haaland, Phil Foden, and Jeremy Doku. Haaland's about 10.7K, not a must at this price. There's other goal scorers, and it's not like he's minus 300. Foden, he's had some up and down performances, priced around 9,700, not so bad. And then Doku, I think Doku is the one who I think is the easiest name to click. The whole offense seems to be funneling through him, and at 8,700, I feel like he's a little bit too cheap. But yeah, otherwise, I think I agree, Basil. I'm not super excited to roster these guys. I don't think I want to roster Erling Haaland in cash, for example, at least not right now, looking at the context of everything. And, I probably get to Phil Foden, but just because I click Manchester City like a chalk donk that I am. But it is tough to click, and there could be rotation. Adam doesn't even have Julian Alvarez in the lineup, who at 9,100 probably is a must. But we're talking about issues with sub patterns. Who really knows what's going on? Though I must say, Oscar Bob, mega chalk if he starts at 3,500. That's probably the one name that you had in mind for your regular starters.
Exactly. If Bob's in there, he's definitely in the lineups.
He's probably going to be the most owned player overall if he's in, even if he only plays 60 minutes. So, I mean, what to do in those situations? It's always tough. Well, what matchups do you like, Basil? I mean, to me, I really like the Young Boys Red Star, but I want to find those like premium players in the other matchups. So what were you kind of drawn to right away?
Well, my concern with the Young Boys and Red Star is that the game doesn't matter in terms of the Champions League, right? Neither can get out of the group. So my concern there is simply, do the players care? What sort of rotation is there going to be? And because those are teams that I don't really pay that much attention to in terms of their leagues, I'm not as comfortable with it. But if players are under, 4K, I'm interested. Yeah. So I will at least look at them, and we'll see what those lineups look like. But I'm more interested in like the Feyenoord Atleti game. That's a game that matters. Feyenoord scores a lot, but they also get scored on a lot. Atleti usually doesn't get scored on that much and doesn't score that much, right? But I would expect to see some goals from Atleti at least. I'm just not a believer in Newcastle. I think PSG should win. But then again, Newcastle keeps beating teams that I don't think they should. So, I can definitely see some action there. And AC Milan, too, I think there could be some good attacking returns there. I'm not as interested in Dortmund.
Yeah, I'm not too terribly interested in Dortmund. I'm interested in AC Milan at their prices. So you have Christian Pulisic. He's looking at around 7,500. I forget the exact price. I don't really play Giroud a lot, but he's often like in the 8Ks at 6,800. I can more accept a player with his range of outcomes. I mean, what do you think about Barcelona? I'm struggling a little bit with this Barcelona side, one who doesn't really have too convincing a form. Lewandowski's expensive at 10.1K. I guess he can still score a brace in any match, but he's getting a little old. And then you're looking and they're relying on a lot of young players, and the minutes just don't seem terribly good either. And it seems like the set pieces are splitting, which might remove Ilkay Gundogan from the cash conversation. It just seems like a tough spot, and not like I want to advocate playing road underdogs in Champions League. I just think I'm not really feeling bad if I don't play much Barcelona overall in my lineups. What do you think about that game?
Yep, I agree. I tried to go back and look at their game from this weekend, and I really had no idea what was going on in terms of the rotation. When you look at the players that they're subbing on, does that mean those are the players that are going to be starting? Or I have no idea. So it's really hard to predict the minutes there. I could see having a lineup that includes Lewandowski just because he is capable of scoring a lot of goals, but I'm less comfortable with the rest of the players there. Gundogan was someone I was looking at, but I actually wasn't too familiar with the fact that you're saying he may be taking less sets. So, that's even something that, I don't like it because usually he plays a little bit deeper anyway, but, it's someone that I would have considered normally.
Yeah, we can pull up the game log. So when he's under 7K, he's definitely worth considering in a good spot. I noticed that Ferran Torres started over the weekend and he took 3 set pieces. So we can pull up the tracker. And then anytime Rafinha starts, I think there's a chance that he can pitch in on set pieces. I don't know if we have like a sufficiently large sample size. So 1 second while I click on the Gundu God for a moment. But yeah, I love this tool, the set piece crosses and shots tool. It sort of gives you a good view about what's going on in recent trends. And yeah, Rafinha has pitched in a little bit. Gundogan's still taking most of them, but Torres does pitch in when he starts, and that's sort of frustrating. So if you told me someone like Gundogan has, a near monopoly, 75% of the set pieces, okay, now I can start clicking it. At 6,900, that's opportunity cost that starts kicking in, at least for me, even in cash games. So I don't know. What do you think about that first impression looking at the set piece split?
Yeah, it's close. It just comes down to who's playing. Because ultimately, wouldn't Ferran Torres also play in the same spot as Rafinha, or do they ever play together?
Man, I wish I knew.
I know that's not easy for you to pull up, but
yeah. I mean, I guess we'll just see, right? I mean, like if it's Rafinha, on the off chance that it's Rafinha, Ferran, and Gundogan, we can just say this is a mess. But maybe if it's a direct split, so maybe you're right. Like Ferran Torres is only going to play with Rafinha, then maybe it's okay to have a 50-50 split. Is that what you're getting at, or?
Well, I'm expecting the lineup to look like the one that you guys actually have posted. So I don't think any of those people are going to take sets other than Gundogan.
Yeah, and in that case, that's a good point to mention. So Adam's lineup, we have Alex Baldi and João Cancelo at fullbacks, Frankie de Jong, Pedri, and Gundogan in midfield. So I think Pedri will probably be the most forward there, and then Gundogan second most. De Jong kind of does his own thing in the middle. Nice distributor, but not necessarily getting forward. And then you have the wingers. You have João Felix, the 16-year-old Lamine Yamal. He's been exciting to watch when he's on the field. And then Lewandowski leading the line. If it was that lineup, then it's very good for you to emphasize that Gundogan is definitely in the cash game radar. And I mean, if you take most of the set pieces, you can't complain when the main set piece taker gets an assist. Let's just put it that way.
Exactly.
Well, let's dig into actual like position by position dynamics. So we usually start with the forward position, Basil. So I'm going to pull up the forwards. And again, it's a situation where, all right, Erling Haaland, 10.7K, sure, you can play him. We know exactly the range of outcomes we're getting, but there's definitely some viable alternatives. I think this Newcastle defense is quite suspect, so I'm really interested in the PSG attack in this game. I mean, if you scroll up, the injury list is absolutely brutal. It like I can't fit it all into my page with this Zoom. So it's tough for Newcastle. They're not fielding their strongest side. I mean, Jamal Lascelles is not their strongest center back, and Lewis Hall is not necessarily really a defensive player either. And they're starting young Lewis Smiley, Joelinton, and Bruno Guimaraes are good players, but it's kind of a disjointed Newcastle side, and you've gotten some chaotic results. I mean, they played really well against Chelsea over the weekend, but they got slaughtered by Bournemouth if you watched that game before the international break. But that was a whole long tangent on Newcastle's injuries to say Kylian Mbappe is a pretty good play, which is hardly an original take. I kind of like him the most of those expensive forwards for a tournament point of view. Your boy Antoine Griezmann, though, at 9,800. If you're pretty interested in this Atletico Madrid Feyenoord game, Basil, Griezmann might be your guy in most of your lineups. So are you thinking this is a big spot for him?
That's my favorite of the people that are more than 9K at forward. But Mbappe is number 2 there. And that's simply down to pricing. Like I said at the beginning of the show, I don't know how Newcastle keeps doing it, but this is a spot where Mbappe can do it against anyone. So I don't see why this couldn't be a big game for him in a game that matters. So I like both of those plays.
Yeah, and if we look at the side, I think Mbappe, I think he can float around really on either wing, but if he's going down the left, I don't know, either matchup on the wing should be good no matter where Mbappe is attacking, right? Lewis Hall is not the most defensive player. And Trippier, he's a good forward player, but Mbappe's presence might pin Trippier back a little bit, which affects Trippier's range of outcomes as well at 7,500. We can get into that in defender, but you're looking at those matchups, and I agree, man. That's a pretty good spot for Kylian Mbappe. And then, why don't you tell us a little bit more about how you kind of got into the? You said that you've been following Feyenoord a little bit, and they've been getting into higher scoring games. So you think that could be a fruitful matchup? Traditionally, I always think of Atletico Madrid as a more defensive team, not one that's necessarily looking to attack right away. So Griezmann wasn't on my radar immediately. I mean, he's at a good price for a set piece monopoly taker. But what sort of factors, if you can get a little more detail, have you into that game as a sort of positive game environment?
Well, Feyenoord even though they win a lot in the Dutch league, they do get scored on a lot. So, even though Atletico is a more defensive team, they still have strong attacking talent, and there's no reason they can't score 1 to 2 goals there. So I just think Feyenoord's weak defensively, so you have to consider Griezmann and Morata because they can score against a weak defense, even if Feyenoord can score the other way.
Yeah, and even I guess if it's on a road match, I think you're keying in on an important point as well, right? Talking about this is a game that matters. And if you do believe in Feyenoord's ability to score, I mean, then it has to be absolute rocket ships for Atletico Madrid. So they're going to have to bomb forward and get the attacks going. So I think that's a sharp take and a really good point about Atletico Madrid there. But yeah, they're all good options at top, but yeah, Mbappe seems most interesting, and you've sold me a bit on Griezmann. One name I really like for cash games if he starts, Jeremy Doku. I mean, how impressive has he been for your favorite rival, Manchester City? It seems like most of the attack does really go through him, and he's hitting quite a floor lately with crosses, shots, and chances created. Probably at 8,700, probably a name I consider in cash games. I know that's not the format you play the most, but he was one of the first names that I clicked.
Yeah, I mean, and he's not someone that gets the full 90 all the time. Sometimes he's brought on as a sub. So, if this is a chance for him to start from the beginning and play more minutes than normal, then, there's no reason he couldn't go off.
Yeah. Would you have any interest in Feyenoord bringbacks, I guess, looking at the prices? I don't know if that's the strategy you necessarily want to take. Maybe you just hope that Feyenoord get that goal, and then you can find the fantasy points elsewhere. Santiago Jimenez has at 7,900, a little bit expensive, but not as expensive as he has been in previous slates, has one of the best goal scoring odds of the entire slate. You can imagine a game stack going in that favor if you keep on sort of thinking about this game script quite a lot. Is that a little bit too expensive for the correlation for you, or is that maybe something that you're looking at, some of these nice Feyenoord forwards? So here's going to be the first mispronunciation. We got Igor Paixão down there at 6,700. I know he takes some set pieces for them. Definitely some names if you want bringbacks, Basil.
Yeah, well, Santi is a big dude. He scores a lot of goals. I think you have to consider him. Calvin Stangs, who takes some sets, and Paixão, like you're saying, I think is how you say it. I like him. He actually just doesn't play beyond 75 minutes very often if you look at his game log. So that's my concern there. But for the price, it's still not that bad. But I would be concerned about playing too much of him because of the minutes. But Stangs and Santi, I would consider.
Yeah, I'm pulling up Stangs. I think Stangs scored a hat trick over international break. If you were a DGen playing these Euro DFS, I think they had some matchup against Gibraltar. So not as easy a spot for Stangs, but definitely a talented attacking player.
Yeah, and if you look at the reverse fixture, I think Stangs still got 10 points or something. Like he'll still get points against Atletico just from sets.
Yeah, I can actually pull that game log up right away. So in the reverse fixture, nice 90 minutes, 4 chances created, 9 crosses, 8 corner crosses. We love to see that. Yeah, a 14-point floor. That's the type of player that if they score 1 goal or get an assist, you really start to feel like you either have him or you're hoping you can break even on the day. All right, let's take a look at the other forward options then. Yeah, those definitely seem most appealing to me. I was scrolling down and looking at a few of the young boys options. I know you're not necessarily as enthusiastic about this game, but these are also like 2 small clubs. So I think potentially a spot in the Europa League, which you earn for getting 3rd place, I think that does matter some. I have to switch my screen over. I think that does matter some for clubs like Red Star and for I just lost it, Young Boys. And I think that's worth considering. So they might want to put on a show. So maybe, I guess there is 2 ways of thinking about it. It's a cagey affair with not much to play for, but maybe you want to put on a show in front of your fans. And I think the Europa League qualification does mean something. Meshkak Elia is an interesting name at 6,400. He's a forward. So usually what happens is that Young Boys are putting up two strikers up front. Cedric Itten is hurt, so there's going to be other options that are starting for Young Boys. And Ilya actually is averaging like 3 crosses per 90 minutes. I checked on FBref, in the Swiss league, but this suggests a player who wanders out, might get a few floor points. And at home against Red Star, if that game environment does get a little bit silly, I think that's a decent price on someone like Elia. But there are definitely other options in this game. So this is a name I can't say, but Jean-Pierre Nassam, he's a forward. He's taken penalties, and I think he's about 5,600 for Young Boys. So anytime you have penalties at home for a favorite, that's worth considering. And then you also have Darian Males for Young Boys. I think he's forward eligible in 3,800. He's one of these guys who never plays much more than 65 minutes, but he has taken some set pieces. So while you were doing some research on Young Boys, these names spring out to you, or did any others at the forward position look interesting?
Yeah, I didn't dig too deep into it because I just want to see what lineups are put out tomorrow and then figure it out. Because it's too hard to predict in a game that may or may not matter depending on if they care about the Europa League. But anyone under 4K, I would definitely look at and consider. And then any of the attacking players on Young Boys, I would consider. I'm less interested on the Red Star side.
Yeah, like these strikers, I don't know too much about on the Red Star side. And then when we talk about midfield, we can talk about the other options. There's a couple pretty silly floors depending on who starts for Red Star. But yeah, overall, I agree. I think Males may see some looks. I mean, near the Stone Min, and then he's not going to play 90, but 8.69 floor points per 90. That's just a pretty good spot. And I think some sources are suggesting that Crosso might start. He's taken 3 penalties for Red Star. And maybe I can change your mind about the attacking players on Red Star if I told you there's a penalty taker at 3.6K.
Yep, under 4K, I'm looking at him. That's really it. I just wouldn't want to pay up for someone that is on a team that I don't think is very good and is playing a game that I don't think it matters that much. But ultimately, I think you have a fair point on the Europa League mattering to these smaller clubs. So
yeah. I mean, we'll see how it goes. But I think that's a pretty good breakdown of the forward position. I mean, there's a ton of names to play. We haven't even mentioned like Lamine Yamal. We're not enthusiastic about Barcelona, but I mean, what a great price he is in a good matchup if you believe in that spot. So I don't think you're really short of any options. A lot of tournament options in the low range. I do think you're going to click on expensive set piece takers at least twice at the forward spot overall, though. Any other takes on forward, Basil, or shall we move on to the less exciting midfield?
I know we just kind of brushed over them, but I think Pulisic and Giroud are definitely
Oh, I
players that I
forgot
would
Pulisic.
consider.
Yeah.
Because Pulisic, I think he only played 75 minutes in the last game. I think he was coming back from an injury, if I remember correctly. But I think he took some sets, and I think that's someone you have to consider. But ultimately, there is risk on minutes there.
Yeah, there's always a little bit of risk of minutes with Pulisic, but I don't know. A lot of these Italian teams, especially, they rest their guy. They like sub their players early on a Champions League week. That's something I've noticed. I know Inter do it all the time, and certainly AC Milan. But if you look at the lineup, Milan have kind of had a messy set piece split this whole season. But I do think Pulisic is definitely going to take a role. And at 7,500, he's probably a little bit cheap for a favored set piece taker. Someone that you can play in a midfield spot as well. So good on you for reminding me that he exists. I don't think Reinders is going to be a factor necessarily in set pieces. I think it's probably going to be like Pulisic is going to be splitting with Theo Hernandez, who looks like a pretty good defense play once we get into that side of the position. But yeah, I agree. It's tough for me to play some of these AC Milan players. I just feel like, they're a bit more of a cautious team. Those games don't go off, but Pulisic, one of those guys who can get that 20-point, ceiling, not just on one goal based on his floor.
Yeah.
All right, let's dig into our midfield position then. Not too much exciting on the expensive end for midfield only for me. Someone like Jack Grealish, even if he starts, you're talking about maybe Pep pulling some of these guys early. 8,300. I guess that's fine. It's just not something that's terribly exciting. Julian Brandt, if Marco Reus starts, I mean, they're underdogs anyways, but he's not going to be a set piece monopolist. I was interested because I am a bit more interested in this Red Star game in Gaylor Kangakaku. So if you pull up his game log, he's not played too much, at least in the Champions League so far. But in his one start, he pulled off 12 floor points at home against Red Star Belgrade. And if you look at his per 90 stats in the Europa League, which RotoWire has, there's some exciting stuff in these game logs. You're looking at a player who, he's a bit older, but 2 shots per 90 pretty well on a pretty good historical sample. Good chances created and definitely crossing. And he will take set pieces from both sides, which is something that you can see on heat maps if you really grind these, SofaScore match logs. He's a name that's interesting for me, but I really don't want to play 7,200. Even then, that's a little bit too sick, and I'm probably a bit more excited about the Young Boys match than most. But a name that's worth looking at nonetheless.
Yeah, it's worth it. And if you're playing an event that has multiple lineups, I think you can throw one in. But it's not something I would, if you're playing cash and you just need one lineup, it's not someone I would be super excited about because of the price.
Yeah, well, secret between you and me, he's in my cash game dummy lineup. I'll probably trade it, but if you want, you can scoop my head-to-heads out there. It's tough to ignore that floor, but I do think that like the fragility there makes it more of a, you have 3 lineups in the king of the pitch and maybe throw him in one of them just in case that one goes nuclear. But yeah, I guess that leaves the first real serious cash game option, Ilkay Gundogan, 6,900. I mean, how likely are you to roster him in cash games? I feel like you kind of just have to click him on principle if Ferran Torres and Rafinha aren't starting.
Yep, if the lineup is as you have it displayed in the projected lineups, I think most of the time you'll make my lineups.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. So Ilkay Gundogan, good cash game play in that setting, should project for getting a good amount of set pieces at home. And then scrolling down a little bit more, I think below 5K, things start to get rather interesting. So if Kanga doesn't start, Hwang In-beom at 5,100, he's shown some flashes of getting a lot of set pieces. And I think he was kind of hard done to not get an assist maybe 2 Champions League slates ago. That's a name I'm very much interested in. The price is much better, around 5K, than it is 7,200 with Kanga. I won't play Hwang. A lot of people did when Kanga started, and they didn't get the set pieces. So I think I almost screamed when he got the assist. I had a bad sweat on this one. I remember this is when I lost the king of the pitch seat by 2 points versus Ben Sesko, but whatever. Hwang's an interesting name, but I think there are some options below 5K that you can click, at least in tournaments. So who sticks out to you in the cheap range? I think we're going to be shopping here, and I think there's some good options.
Yeah, Chukwueze and maybe Reinders for me. I think Reinders lost sets when Pulisic was back, but because of the price, if you assume Pulisic is going to get subbed off early, there's going to be some amount of the time that Reinders may take sets in that game. And I think he's 4K. And then, Chukwueze has been playing in a more advanced role and I think is under 4. So those are two that I'm looking at.
I truthfully can't even find his price. He must have not have had enough. That must be a new addition because Chukwueze is playing because of the injury to Rafael Leao, right? I think that's the only reason that he's in.
And I believe there's another player who is labeled as out who would normally split minutes with Chukwueze there. So I think there's a chance Chukwueze actually goes 90.
That's a nice shout right there. So, yeah, he's going to be pretty cheap. I'm going to pull him up on the DraftKings site while you mentioned that. Yeah, 3,200. So you've sold me. If a player's 3,200 and has a pulse for a favorite, I think sometimes there just aren't midfielders that cheap on a Premier League slate. Like it's like 3,500 and you're paying for Lord knows who. Someone I would never want to play though. Maybe like Will Hughes if he wasn't taking set pieces or something like that. Interesting plays there with the AC Milan guys. You have Ruben Loftus-Cheek, who should be in a more attacking role. I haven't looked too carefully into him, but but all of those players are cheap and could contribute if they're playing a little bit more forward. What about Marcus Llorente, 4,400? A bit of a Swiss Army knife player for Atleti. But if you're going to play a few Atletico Madrid players, might make sense. Probably not, in this, playing one lineup or two lineups. But if you have a few more, I could see myself getting there.
Potentially. He's not someone I had high on my list, just when you factor in if you're going to go Gundogan and Chukwueze. I don't think you need to play him, but
yeah,
I could see a world, I guess, where maybe in some lineups you throw him in.
Yeah, that's probably more of a large field move now that I'm looking at his game logs. Kind of inconsistent. I just know that he plays a lot of different roles, so if the setup looks good for him, I always like talented players at that price, but I think maybe I can put on the brakes when it comes to Llorente. But yeah, a lot of exciting options. Anyone you think that we've missed in this range? I just don't think this is a spot where you're going to be spending up too much, and probably very much a consensus construction where you have, a Gundogan and then just pay down for the player that you like best. Probably the consensus.
Yeah, the other one that I was somewhat interested in, which may be kind of a bad pick, I'm not sure, but I just don't know much about the Dutch league. But Quentin Timber, I know he plays a bit deeper, but he gets a lot of assists in the Dutch league. I know it hasn't happened in the Champions League, but it's someone that I was at least looking at because of the numbers there. It may not materialize against Atleti, but is one of those like middling price players that I would at least look at, but you may not need to go there.
Yeah, maybe not needing to go there, especially, I'll see your Feyenoord and raise you young boys. Philip Ugrinik at 5,800, I think should be splitting some set pieces for young boys. He's a bit of a deeper role. I think Adam has him in more of an attacking role, but I've seen him on old lineups, 3 more forward players for young boys, and then Ugrinik is in the midfield. He does take some set piece and cross quite frequently. I think he's the second leading player in crosses and, shoots at an okay rate. I think Ugrinik is going to see some action, even as a cash game type of target. I like that name a little bit more just in case he can contribute to an assist. I also think he has quite a few goals this season, but I would have to look it up. I think it's in my article, though, which is all the reason to become a RotoWire subscriber. RotoWire.com/soccer trial. You can take a look at my article, which talks a little bit more in depth about some of these young boys players. But yeah, Ugrinik is definitely a name on my radar. I think a good upside in this spot. But let's take it over to Defender. So Defender is somewhat interesting. This is the day of the Champions League where the defending options are actually quite interesting. I think it's the Wednesday slate that is just absolutely barren of good Defender plays, but maybe I'm getting my memory scrubbed and mixed up. But Kieran Trippier, you don't sound like a Newcastle believer, so it's probably going to be difficult, Basil, to sell you on a $7,500 Kieran Trippier. Then again, I was struggling with Kieran Trippier on the show this weekend, and he almost windmill dunked on me on schedule, as what happens whenever I doubt his abilities. He took a free kick shot and it hit the crossbar. He could have ended up with, 27 points quite easily. Do you think that there's any life in Newcastle for maybe this PSG Newcastle game to be a bit more back and forth, which might mean that Trippier is a bit involved on set pieces and there's just kind of like no real structure to the game? Or are maybe you interested in some of these 5K level defenders who have similar upside, maybe not quite the floor, but can keep up with Trippier even if he does quite well?
Yeah, I'm more interested in the cheaper defenders, but Trippier seems to always have a serviceable, points output. So it's not someone that I would prioritize, but it's definitely someone that I want some exposure to. And of course, if the money's there, I will put him in.
Yeah, I think the money might end up like being there. If you're not, I'm just when I'm clicking lineups and if you have like a Foden Doku or like a Griezmann Doku start, you're not spending up at midfield. You might accidentally end up having enough money for Kieran Trippier. So you have to decide, do you want to play a Kieran Trippier or do you maybe want to finagle things and then play like a Christian Pulisic in a utility spot instead? Those are sort of the comparisons that you want to be making, at least in cash games. Probably have to side with Pulisic in a better matchup, but it's tough. I mean, Trippier has that really serviceable floor, as you mentioned.
Yeah, you're not playing him for the clean sheet in that matchup. You're playing him for just the sets, and there's no reason that Newcastle can't blow out more teams that it doesn't seem like they should. So I wouldn't fault anyone for playing Trippier.
Yeah, I almost wouldn't. I would almost never play Trippier with Nick Pope because I feel like I want PSG to score in that type of matchup. I've kind of run into trouble getting a bit too extremist in this line of thinking, but sometimes the fullbacks when they're this expensive, the clean sheet, that's not what you're playing for. You're looking for assists or 10 corner type of outlier performances. Some other names at defender, João Cancelo is one of the most tilting clicks in DFS, at least for me. At 6K, he hasn't been playing a full 90 every single time, I think. So I'm not super interested, but he can score a goal in any given matchup. David Raum is probably not a play on the road at Manchester City. But the two names that really excited me in this range, Basil, were Hakimi at 5,700, who I really just want to find one of these interleague slates where he puts up 25 points and plug that into the Champions League just once for me. Hakimi's going to be on the same side that Lewis Hall is defending. So I think in GPPs, this has to be the one. He's going to score in the Champions League at some point. I really like this matchup for him in tournaments. Theo Hernandez, though, might be the better cash play, taking some set pieces. What do you think about these mid-price guys? I think you're going to spend at least once here.
Yeah, so I threw up together one lineup so far just to feel it out, and I had Theo Hernandez in, but I have $100 to spare. So it could be either one of them. And those are two that I was looking at. I think both could have big games. I like both. I'd be happy to play either or both together.
Yeah, I think both together would be a great move. I think Theo Hernandez is going to be very popular. If you look at his game logs, he scored a penalty over the weekend. But you should remember that Olivier Giroud was suspended for the blurb was really funny, insulting a referee on his 100th appearance. So really getting into the 100s in AC Milan in style. I think Giroud is still the guy to take penalties if he's on the pitch. But, if you're splitting set pieces, he's a very attacking player. And I think Milan might need him to offer a little bit more attack, especially with some of their players injured. So I think he's a good play in all formats as well. What other names interest you at defender?
Anyone that is cheap. So that is going to come down to seeing what lineups come out. If there's someone in the low fours and lower that ends up starting as a wide defender, I'll be looking at them. So some that come to mind are, I think it's Hartman. I think Calabria, and I don't know how to pronounce it. I think Newcoop, who has not had good game logs. I think he may be negative on points, but I think those are all fine. Those were ones that I kind of jotted down to at least keep in mind, but that's going to be more so on the, we'll see who ends up starting. And if I remember correctly, is it Garcia who is like the defender who is a bit more attacking?
Yes.
So that's another one, but it's just not a matchup I was interested in.
Yeah, Garcia was one of the first names that I had written down at 3,800. He's been taking some set pieces. Like, again, I pulled up all the Dutch league stats. For some reason, that's the one thing I'm remembering today. And he has 72 crosses in the Swiss league so far, so you can take that stat to the bank. I've seen Saramek rather amusingly play him on the road to Manchester City in cash. So talk about the spreadsheets. He's someone who must project well, but Ceramec's done some wacky things the past few weeks. I think he's you said it, like anyone under 4,500 who's cheap and starting and has some attacking output. I think that's a pretty good shout, especially when you're someone like Garcia who has some set pieces. Hartman, I know, is an attacking player. He was a very popular click in this aforementioned Gibraltar game that I mentioned. So definitely an attacking player. Do Feyenoord play with a back four or three center backs? I think he'll be playing as just a regular fullback. Yeah. And Basil, who was the last name that you mentioned? I missed him, and I don't know what team he plays for.
I had mentioned Calabria and Nuke Hoop. I think he's like in the low threes, but I think he plays wide. Okay. I don't know if he's in your projected lineups now.
He might not necessarily be. So is he on Feyenoord?
I think it was. I don't even know. That shows how little I know about him. I think it was Feyenoord or Dortmund.
Oh, okay. Feyenoord. New Coop right here, right?
Bart. Oh, he's out. Okay.
Our boy Bart. Yeah, we can open up the log. I'm glad we did the forensic work and we found him.
I think he was listed initially as like playing, or maybe he played this weekend. That's why I had made a note of him, but I don't know what happened. Maybe he got hurt or something.
Yeah, we actually have a new blurb hot off the presses today. He had a hamstring injury on Saturday. Manager Arnie Slot. Bart will undergo an MRI scan one of these days, which will show exactly how long he'll be out. That sounds like he will indeed not play. So all that detective work for nothing. Oh, wow. Yeah, plenty of fullbacks to play, though, that look cheap. Is this kind of one of those slates where, you do a similar thing? Maybe you try to... So on your King of the Pitch winning lineup, you just played the entire Bournemouth defense, more or less. It doesn't seem like it quite sets up for that when there's so many viable sort of wide attacking defenders. Are you going to be looking at center backs or anyone particularly cheap? I mean, maybe as a one-off, but I feel like you want to find the points on offense.
Yeah, I don't think you need a center back, and I don't think you need to try and correlate the way that I did in that lineup that you're referencing with two defenders and a goalie from the same team. I'd just be looking for a combination of, the two that we mentioned, the PSG and AC Milan options, and then maybe one cheap wide player, and just come up with whatever combinations that you can.
Yeah, I agree with you. And there's so many attacking players, it's like the clean sheet is almost like it just, when it's 3 points and you might have defenders scoring over 10 points, it just doesn't matter nearly quite as much in setups just like this. Exactly. So yeah, I mean, plenty of options. It might even be a 3-defender slate in some levels, just because they're so cheap. Maybe play a forward in another spot. So I don't necessarily feel that pressure, especially when you have potential goal scoring defenders. So something worth thinking about.
Yeah, if you want to play the Mbappe, Griezmann together, you may need to play 3 cheap defenders, but that also seems fine here.
Yeah, especially when they have floors in that cracking Young Boys Red Star matchup. So Basil, I've gotten a lot of stick lately for my goalkeeper picks. So someone on Twitter called me a donkey for playing Ederson last game week. And of course he was scored on. So it does kind of feel like a donkey when I play Ederson. Poor Roadman in the Discord, I told him to play Trafford, and Burnley conceded like 15 goals. The people are desperate for a winning goalkeeper pick, and I have to capitulate. I'm not the one to provide it. So who is your gold star goalkeeper lock? No pressure.
Lock is tough, but I guess if I had to pick one, probably Jan Oblak would be my pick, with Donnarumma as a close second. Once again, not a believer in Newcastle, but then again, they keep doing it. So those are the two that I've been looking at, as well as Feyenoord's goalie because of the price. I think that's fine too, because there could be a world where Atleti are just not attacking enough and they get a clean sheet. But if they do get scored on, I don't expect them to get many saves. So that's a concern there.
Yeah, that's one of those problems whenever you have we've had spots where it's Ederson against young boys. Ugrinik, I think, was the one who scored a goal, and it's just like guaranteed that Ederson is going to finish with at best 3 points. It's so frustrating when you pay up. But in these matchups, I actually think it's a bit enticing to pay up when there's some competent outfits against these strong favorites, right? Like RB Leipzig could force a few saves from Ederson. So if you're looking, why am I paying 5,900 when they're hosting Leipzig, who are a decent team? In previous matchups, they were conceding to much worse opposition. Maybe some save upside, and there's actually a route to 18 points for an Ederson on this type of slate.
I don't think there's a world where I play Ederson, but if his backup plays, I am a lot more interested in that. I just don't think Man City will care like the regular starters, but I think that the backup will care. So that's kind of where I could see myself going the Man City route.
I see. Is the carrying metric, is that one do you have a column for?
Don't have a column for that on the
does
spreadsheet.
Underscore
but...
care. Yes. Boots. I think that's a fair point. Ederson kind of gets himself into weird positions. I really like that Donnarumma shout. For some reason, that wasn't a name that stuck out to me, but Newcastle, again, good enough team to get some shots on goal. So, you have the 18-point random performance. For cash, I was kind of just going to click whatever name fit, spend down. It feels gross to click an away goalkeeper, but I'll pick the worst one if I have to. I highlighted Bajo in the article, but you've persuaded me that maybe that will not be the route after Atletico score 3 goals. Some of these spend-out options do seem quite appealing in tournaments. Maybe a Mike Maignan as well. Dortmund could give them some hell. Both of those are going to be very competitive matches. So if one team scores and the other has to defend, you feel like the win, clean sheet, and save combinations are all working in your favor if you're looking at that group. But I don't know, man. Like, I'm talking about this as if I know what the hell I'm talking about. Like, do you have any secret sauce to goalkeeper, or are you in our camp of just throw a dart and hope that it works out for you?
I think that's the big difference that I've seen in how I come up with lineups versus watching you guys. And it seems like nobody cares about their goalkeeper. I really try and pick a clean sheet goalkeeper, or I'll settle for a cheap one against such a huge favorite in the hope that saves rack up. But I've actually done a lot of lineup construction where I will start at goalie rather than end at goalie. So I think I care more about the goalie than a lot of people. But ultimately I don't have a secret sauce here. Look at the odds, look for low goal totals plus a favorite. That could be the way to do it. That's something I've done a lot. I would be concerned about Mike Maignan, though. I think if you look at his logs in combination of Champions League and the Italian League, I don't think he's been that good when you factor in the price. Like in terms of value, I don't think he's been that good. I mean, he has some big games, but I think if you look at the value wise, I think Donnarumma and even Ter Stegen may be better.
Interesting. Well, Ter Stegen might not start. He might be hurt. So would you be willing to play the Barcelona backup keeper?
Probably not.
Probably not. Yeah, I don't feel good about playing favorite backup keepers almost ever. It's like they're 100 cheaper, and you're like, I get that DraftKings sorts these things by win odds roughly, but that can't be the only thing that matters. Like, it's tough to parse ability, but it's got to be more than a $100 downgrade when you have a completely new goalkeeper in there.
Yeah, except for Man City. Man City, I'm fine because there's a world where the other team never shoots, and that goalie can be laying down on the ground and it won't matter. So that's the team where I'll consider the backup. But yeah,
that makes some sense. I think there's some merits what you're talking about clicking a goalkeeper in a spot that you like first. Just many times I've been making lineups, and I have this great combination. I'm looking at the final 2v2, and I just can't pick a goalkeeper that makes any amount of sense in the context of that lineup. So it almost kind of eliminates a lot right away. Like if you just click Donnarumma right away, you know that you're not going to roster any Newcastle players. Not that we were very tempted at the start, but it does clean up the lineup construction. And it kind of is a sticking point. So maybe that is the way to do it. Just lock that in and then worry about the rest instead of trying to make the perfect lineup and then sweating something ridiculous at goalkeeper, or ending up having to pay 3,900 in a 35-man winner take all contest. 3,900 goalkeeper who's almost never going to win or get a clean sheet.
Yeah, when you're making multiple lineups, I actually like starting at goalkeeper because you can kind of figure out the correlation there, right? But if you're saying you're coming up with this combination of players that you like from an attacking sense or outfield sense,
Mm-hmm.
you're just going to pick whatever goalkeeper, fits. But if you build it the other way, for example, like the lineup from the weekend that I won the King of the Pitch, I knew I wanted this lineup to be Bournemouth's defense, right? So I built it out that way.
Exactly.
So, it just kind of depends on the type of event you're playing in.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of sense, and refreshing way, maybe another way to look at your lineups if you've been struggling with these types of things. Ultimately, though, you need the variance to go your way. One of the trickiest positions to tackle. So, man, that's been 55 minutes. This has been a lot of fun, Basil. I think we've covered a ton of angles, given a lot of value to everyone. Do you have anything else that you want to say to the people?
It's been a lot of fun. I think your Discord community is awesome. It's been good getting to know you guys and everyone in there. And yeah, I love the show. I'm happy to be a part of it. And, if you guys have provided a lot of value to me just from saving me a lot of time of finding these secret players. I think Inbom was one you found early on that I wasn't looking at that I was super happy about. So yeah, the work you guys do and finding some players that aren't so obvious is awesome. So thanks for having me.
Oh, well, thanks for joining us, and maybe I should keep some of those players to myself just for my own sake. But Basil, where can the people find you if you want to be found?
I'm on Twitter. I actually don't even know my handle. I don't even know if it's my, it's definitely some combination of my name, but I don't even know if I think you tweeted it. It's
I tweeted it.
Basil_Nabi. Feel free to connect with me on there.
All right, that's fantastic, and he's also in the Discord. And yeah, and if you want to find him, you should be following me on Twitter. I break down cash games every week and during the Champions League, so please follow me at Jack Burkart. Again, Basil, thank you so much. Good luck to all of you. May you all finish second place in the contests that I am playing in, but still have a profitable day nonetheless. We will see you on Wednesday.
All right, good luck.